Hi, I'm your professor, Dr. Lisa English Dowdell, and welcome to this lecture to discuss low fidelity prototypes. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to transform our app ideas into low fidelity prototypes that visually represent the app's structure and the functionality. Now, through the use of wireframing tools and techniques, we're going to focus on understanding what actually makes a low fidelity prototype and why we would use them. So the learning objectives for this lecture is to basically understand the purpose and the benefits of a low fidelity prototype in a mobile app design process, applying wireframe techniques to be able to create simple mockups that will represent your app layout, your navigation, and your user flow. And we'll talk about some appropriate tools that will help us to develop the low fidelity prototype, for your app ideas. And then we'll begin by preparing prototypes for usability testing and gathering initial feedback to inform design improvements. So we'll get our prototypes ready so that in the next lecture we'll be able to start using them for testing. Okay, so what is a prototype? So a prototype is a simulation of how a finished product is going to work. In its basic form, a prototype is an expression of design intent. Prototyping allows designers to present their designs and see them in action. In the context of digital products, a prototype is a simulation of the final interaction between the user and the interface. Now, depending on what a product team needs a prototype to do, it can simulate an entire app or just maybe a single interaction. Now, a lot of people confuse prototypes with static sketches, or wireframes or mockups. Now, these assets are not prototypes. The idea of simulation, um, and again, this is the interactivity, is going to be essential for prototypes. That's why static assets, such as like sketches, wireframes, mockups, can't really be considered prototypes because they don't really show that interaction. Now, prototypes can be made in different ways, and they are, super important, say, for making sure that your app turns out great. Now, they help you to fix any problems before, say, your app is ready for everyone to use. Now, let's break down some of the key aspects of prototypes. One is their purpose. Prototypes are created for a specific purpose, such as evaluating a product's design, their functionality, or maybe user experience. They help answer like essential questions like, does this work as intended? Or is this user friendly? Now, there's also types. That's another aspect. And there are various types of prototypes that range from low fidelity, like sketches and paper mockups, to high fidelity, such as functional software prototypes or physical models. Now, the choice of a prototype depends on the project's needs and their objectives. And then there's feedback and iteration. Now, prototypes facilitate the collection of feedback from users or stakeholders. And this feedback is used to refine and then enhance the concept, which would lead to like a better final product. The iterative process continues until, say, your desired outcome is achieved. Then there's risk reduction. Now, by identifying and addressing potential issues early in the development process, prototypes help reduce the risk associated with full-scale production or implementation. And this can save time, money, and resources. And then last, there's the communication tool aspect. And this is because prototypes, they are a universal language that bridges the gap between design and implementation. They allow the teams to communicate complex ideas and concepts effectively, which enables like collaboration and alignment. Now, real world example of using a prototype for a mobile app design is when the Instagram was developing their stories feature. So when Instagram was kind of planning to introduce stories to the app, they didn't really immediately build the entire feature. Instead, what they did was they built a prototype of the stories concept. Now, this prototype allowed the design and the development teams to be able to test their ideas. They could easily or quickly see if the concept of temporarily disappearing photos and videos was going to be engaging and useful for the users without really investing a lot of time and money into full development. It also allowed them to get user feedback. So Instagram could gather feedback from, say, a small group of users to really kind of understand what worked and what didn't, and then make adjustments based on the feedback. And then with prototyping, they could iterate and refine the design and functionalities of stories before actually rolling it out to their millions of users. Now, this approach saved them time and resources, which ensured that when they finally implemented stories, it was a well-designed and user-friendly feature. So basically, to recap, prototypes allow designers to know whether a design concept works as intended, and they're meant to be quick and easy tests of, say, a potential design solution. So why develop a prototype? So the main goal of creating a prototype is to test designs and product ideas before making the real product. The success of your product is going to depend on whether you test it or not. Now, if you wait until the product's on the market and then people that are using it for the first time, you might get negative feedback from those users. So it's better to gather feedback in a low risk research phase before actually releasing it to the public. So let's discuss a couple of situations where a prototype is going to be necessary. One is to verify the design concept and how it's going to work and if it works as intended. So testing a concept with real users is usually straightforward. By putting an interactive version of the product idea in the hands of real users, the product team can see how the target audience wants to use it and make necessary adjustments. The other is to assess whether people can actually use the product. Now, prototyping is crucial for like identifying and addressing usability issues before launching. So testing helps uncover areas that need improvement, which is why many of the product teams will create prototypes and then have users test them and then refine the design until it's satisfactory. Now, low fidelity prototyping is a fundamental approach in mobile app development where designers and developers will create simplified, basic representations of an app in order to explore and communicate ideas quickly and efficiently. It's going to be a crucial early step in the design process before actually investing significant time and resources into high fidelity prototypes or actual development. Now, here are some basic characteristics of a low fidelity prototype. One is the simplicity. Low fidelity prototypes are intentionally simple and lack intricate details. They often use basic shapes, placeholder images, and minimal visual styling. And this allows the focus to be on the core layout and structure rather than, the fine visual nuances. Also, designers might use like hand-drawn sketches or these rough sketches or wireframes or even digital tools to create like basic representations of the app's interfaces. Now, these sketches convey the general layout without kind of getting into like the specifics of fonts and colors and complex graphics. Next is about content. So, we only show key elements, okay? In low fidelity prototypes, only the key essential elements of the app's content are included. And this means that detailed content and data are often not presented. Instead, placeholders or generic content are used to demonstrate the core functionality. The primary focus here is on the arrangement and the hierarchy of the elements. So we focus on the structure, such as buttons, menus, and navigation. And this helps designers and stakeholders to understand how information will be organized within the app. And then last, characteristic deals with interactivity. So limited interaction is part of a low fidelity prototype. They have minimal minimal and limited interactivity. Instead of being a fully functional, say, buttons or complex interactions, they often will use like simple click-through navigation. For example, tapping on a button might just lead to another screen, but it won't, simulate like every aspects of the final app's behavior. And then interactivity in low fidelity prototypes mainly serve to demonstrate the flow and the navigation within the app. It helps stakeholders and designers to visualize the sequence of screens and interaction. Now, low fidelity prototyping in mobile app design has its own set of advantages and disadvantages. And understanding these pros and cons are going to help you to make informed decisions about when and how to use low fidelity prototypes in your app development process. So, let's talk about some of the pros of the low fidelity prototype. One is creating a low fidelity prototype is going to be cost efficient, as they only require minimal time, effort, and resources. And this can save your time, money, and resources compared to, say, developing a high fidelity prototype or the actual app. So low fidelity prototypes, they don't require like specialized skills and they don't require like specialized resources. It's also possible to create like a low fidelity paper prototype in say just 5 to 10 minutes. And so this allows product teams to explore like different ideas without too much effort. And then low fidelity prototypes are quick and easy to create, making it simple to test like multiple design ideas and iterate on them rapidly. Now, this agility is invaluable to the early stages of the app development. And then by simplifying the visual and the interactive elements, low fidelity prototypes allow you to concentrate, say, on the core concepts or the layout or the user flow. And this helps in identifying and addressing any kind of fundamental design and usability issues early in the process. Also, low fidelity prototypes are great for communicating design ideas to team members or stakeholders or your clients. They provide like a clear visual representation that facilitates discussion and feedback on a high level concepts without really kind of getting bogged down into detail. And the prototype is portable where it can easily be shared and presented. And then last, you can involve end users in the feedback process even at this early stage. Their insight can guide the design in a user-centered direction, ensuring that the app meets the user's needs and their expectations. So now let's talk about some of the cons or disadvantages of a low fidelity prototype. One is that a low fidelity prototype does lack the realism of high fidelity prototypes or the final app. And this can kind of make it challenging to convey like the full user experience, especially if the app relies heavily on visual aesthetics. Also, stakeholders and team members might misinterpret the design or the functionality since low fidelity prototypes often omit visual and interactive details. And this can lead to misunderstandings or misaligned expectations. Also, interaction in low fidelity prototypes is going to be limited, which means that complex app functionality can't be thoroughly tested or demonstrated. And this can be a drawback when the app's success really kind of depends on those intricate interactions. Now, low fidelity prototypes are best for the early design phases and exploring concepts. For certain projects or industries like gaming or high visual apps, they may not be as effective, as these apps really apply heavily or rely heavily, I should say, on visual aesthetics and complex interactions. And then some stakeholders or clients might prefer a more polished or detailed prototype, which can kind of lead to some resistance or lack of enthusiasm for the low fidelity approach. Now, paper prototyping or clickable wireframes are two popular low fidelity prototype techniques. Both techniques are focused on providing the fastest way to iterate design ideas until both the project team and the stakeholders are happy with the basics. Okay, so let's talk about paper prototyping. Now, this is a valuable and low-tech method used in mobile app design to create like preliminary visual representations of an app's interface. So instead of relying on digital tools or software, designers use paper markers and other like tangible material to sketch out the app's screens and their interactions. Now, these paper prototypes allow designers, developers, and stakeholders to kind of quickly visualize and test the app's design and usability. Now, here's how the paper prototyping works and how you can test with it. So, first, designers will sketch individual screens of the app, on sheets of paper. And these sketches include like key elements like buttons, menus, and content area. And each sheet represents like a different screen or an interaction. Now, we'll create, you can create like interactivity or a sense of interactivity because designers will use like these paper elements that can basically be kind of moved or manipulated, such as like paper cutouts, for buttons or overlays that represent like pop-up windows. Now, these elements are typically attached with pins, tape, and other like removable adhesives. And then designers will ensure that there's some kind of logical flow by connecting these sheets of paper to represent like a sequence of screens and interactions within the app. And then what they'll do is they'll test with these paper prototypes. So they identify like a group of users or stakeholders who are willing to participate in, say, the testing process. And this could include like team members, it could be potential users, it could be individuals that are really kind of unfamiliar with the project. So they present the paper prototype to the tester and then they explain the scenario, they should imagine. So for example, like if you're testing, like say a task list app, you might ask the tester to add a new task or mark a task as completed. And then you observe, as the tester follows the scenario, they interact with the paper prototype by physically, say, manipulating the paper elements to simulate like buttons pressed or screen transitions or other actions. And the designer or the facilitator will closely observe the tester's interaction and their reaction. Now, based on the feedback and the observations, then the designer can make like real-time adjustments to the paper prototype. And this can include like modifying the screen or changing the layout or addressing any kind of like usability issues that might come up. And then testing usually or typically involves like multiple iterations with different testers. So each round of testing can kind of uncover like new insight and help refine as far as the app's design. Now, based on this quick process, there are some benefits to this paper prototyping. Okay. One is rapid iteration. The paper prototyping is going to allow for like quick and inexpensive design iterations, which again allows designers to refine the app's layout and functionality before investing in digital development. It also provides that early user feedback. Testing with these paper prototypes is going to involve end users like early in that design process. And so it's going to make it a lot easier to uncover, usability issues and then understand user preference. Also, paper and markers are readily available. So, and they're cost efficient or cost effective. So making paper prototypes accessible to both small and large design teams is going to be low cost and it's going to be low tech. And then, of course, paper prototypes are going to be easy to understand and they facilitate clear communication among the team members and the stakeholders. And it allows designers to concentrate on the app's layout when they're designing these paper prototypes, the app's user flow, and the functionality interaction without really getting distracted from all the visual details. So when developing a low fidelity prototype, we're going to start with creating a wireframe. Now, wireframe is going to be that simplified representation of the app's layout, the navigation, and the user flow. And it's going to act as the blueprint that helps designers and developers structure content and interactions before actually adding any kind of visual design or details. So some of the things that you're going to do, some of the steps that you're going to do is you're going to sketch on paper or use a digital tool, but you're going to start with a rough sketch to map out like the screens, ensuring like clarity in layout and navigation. And then you're going to identify like your key screens, which is going to be like your home screen, maybe your profile, your settings, and how users are going to transition between them. And then you'll use common UI elements, and these will represent like buttons, menus, forms, icons, and you'll use simple shapes like rectangles and lines to just kind of say where these different things would be. And then the thing is, what you want to do when you're designing or when you're looking or actually putting together, as far as these wireframes, designing this layout, you want to focus on as far as user flow. So you want to ensure like there's going to be some kind of logical progression, from one screen to the other in order to create like an intuitive user experience. Don't have it where you go to one screen, you have a button that goes to maybe a second screen, but then you have no way to get back. You don't include some kind of UI component or something within the layout that allows the user to have that flow. Okay, so that's why you want to focus on the user flow when you're even designing as far as your wireframes. Now, just keep in mind, wireframes should be quick, simple, and they should focus on functionality, not aesthetics. So when prototyping a mobile app, it's going to be crucial to follow certain guidelines in order to make the process effective and efficient. So here are 4 important guidelines to consider. One is to just start building. This guideline emphasizes getting started with the prototype as soon as possible. Don't get stuck in the planning or the conceptualization phase for too long. Start the building process early, and this allows you to bring your ideas to life, which often leads to a better understanding of the project's practical aspects. Now, why do we do this? Because starting the prototype early helps us to quickly validate or invalidate our design concepts. It's easier to refine and improve an actual prototype than to make significant changes to the theoretical phase. The next one is don't spend too much time. So prototyping is not about creating a fully functional app, but rather about creating a representation of key elements and interactions. So you want to avoid investing excessive time in creating like high fidelity or exhaustive prototypes early. The focus should be on quick, low-cost iterations. Now, this is because overinvesting in early prototyping can lead to sunk costs. This is a fallacy where you're reluctant to say change your design because you've spent too much time on it. A lean approach allows for more flexibility and adaptability. The next one is to remember what you are testing for. So clearly define the purpose of your prototypes and what specific aspects you want to test. Are you testing the user interface, the flow, or a particular feature? Keeping the testing objectives in mind helps you create a prototype that's aligned with your goals. And why do we do this? Because prototyping can become unfocused, if you try to test everything at once. Okay, by knowing what you're testing for, you can actually make the prototype more targeted and effective in gathering the necessary feedback. And then the last is to build with the user in mind. You know, Throughout the prototyping process, always consider the end user. Think about their needs, their preferences, and how they would interact with your app. Incorporate user feedback and incorporate user-centered design principles into your prototype. This is because building with the user in mind is going to be essential to the ultimate success of your app, depending on how well it meets the user's needs and expectations. Prototyping with the user's feedback ensures that the user's design, or the app's design rather, is user friendly and effective. Now, a few weeks ago, we discussed design thinking, but I wanted to kind of do a review because using design thinking should be something that we incorporate in building our prototypes. So, if you remember, design thinking is a human centered problem solving approach that's used by designers and innovators to create innovative and user focused solutions. Now, it typically consists of 5 stages, which are often iterative and may overlap. The first stage is to empathize. Now, in this initial stage, designers seek to understand the need and the perspective of the people that they're designing for. Now, this involves engaging with the users, observing their behavior, and conducting interviews to gain insight into their problems, their experiences, and their emotions. The goal is to develop deep empathy for the end user and their challenges. The next phase is the define phase. And after gathering, like, say, a wealth of information, this step is to synthesize and define the core problems and opportunities. So, designers create a clear and specific problem statement based on their research, identifying like the key issues that they need to address. Now, this stage helps set a precise and actionable design challenge. The next is the ideate stage. So, ideation is about generating a wide range of creative solutions to the defined problem. Now, it involves brainstorming, sketching, and other creative techniques in order to encourage free thinking. Now, the focus is going to be on generating a multitude of ideas without judgment or evaluation. And then a diverse, what happens is that you get a diverse amount of ideas, and they're encouraged. These diverse ideas are encouraged, and they ensure innovation. The next phase is prototyping. So, in this phase, designers create tangible representations of their ideas. Now, these prototypes can take on various forms from, again, simple sketches and low fidelity mockups to more complex and interactive models. Now, prototyping is going to help the designers to test and communicate their concepts quickly, gaining valuable feedback that can really help guide further development. And then the last stage is the testing of the prototype, with real users in order to gain insight and feedback. Now, this step is going to allow designers to evaluate like the effectiveness of their solutions and identify like any areas that might need improvement. Testing helps refine and iterate on the design and may lead to, say, new insights that influence the problem definition and the ideation stages. Now, remember, like I said, this is an iteration, so you're going to be kind of going through, you may be going through these different stages until you get something that you're happy with. Now, to document the logical progression from one screen to the other before we actually start testing with our prototype, we'll build a navigation diagram or a user flow diagram. Now, you can draw this user flow diagram digitally, using your prototype screens, or you can actually do it on paper. Now I'm going to show you how I did it using PowerPoint for my Drink More app, using the paper prototype that I designed for my app. Okay, so we first start off by designing our screen. So what we want to do, the first thing is to define our app screen. So we need to decide like what screens our app is going to need. Are we going to use a home screen, a login screen, a profile screen? And so what I did is I created a table, okay? And for each screen that I'm going to build for my prototype, I'm going to define like what the screen is. I'm going to write a short description explaining like the purpose of the screen. And then I'm going to have a column here that talks about like what this screen is going to link to, like what other screens that it's going to link to, like the home screen will link to like the profile screen or the settings screen or different things like that. So I use this table to define those things first. Okay. So now Now for each one of these screens, what we do is we're going to um, draw out what we want that screen to look like. We're gonna, and again, keep in mind you're not gonna get into very many aesthetics with this, but we want to have like a rough draft, of the screen. So, for instance, we've got our home page here. So I'm just going to show you what I did is I took index cards and I actually drew out what I wanted that screen to look like. So that's for my home page. And then for my log a drink page, let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so that's just kind of my rough draft for that. Then there's the intake history page. So based on what I wanted that page to have, what the description was, I kind of drew a rough draft of that. And then my set goals page, um, I drew out my what I wanted that set goals page to do. So like I said, take some index cards and just kind of draw them out. I use the index cards because proportionally they would be very similar to as far as maybe the mobile interface. And so it in itself would limit me to looking at, okay, you don't want to overcrowd, your layout. You don't want to have too much on your layout. And so that kind of gives me a little bit more perspective when I'm designing, as far as my pages and things like that. Like I said, you see how very rough this is. There are stencils that are out there that you could use to help you. I'll put some links to some different resources, if you want to kind of fine tune this. But again, what you want is you want to create something that can easily be kind of tossed. Like for instance, if I were to use this in my testing and I discovered maybe some aspects of it, didn't work, or were confusing to the user, I could ball this up and then resketch it, rather quickly. So, again, that's the thing about, the low fidelity prototype. Now, let me show you how I work with PowerPoint in order to be able to create my navigation diagram or my user flow diagram so that I can show how the screens are going to be connected to each other. Okay, so what I did is I opened up PowerPoint and then I did an insert as far as my images into the PowerPoint. Now I'm going to resize them. Let me see if I can do this all at the same time. Okay, so that I've got four, so I just want to make sure I can get all four of them on my screen. So that's good. All right, so also, what I'm going to do is, again, when you do your index cards, you're going to maybe take a picture of them and then upload them to your computer, so that you can be able to, if you decide that you're going to do a digital, like I'm doing with Photoshop here. I mean, not with Photoshop. I'm sorry, with PowerPoint. I'm going to show how the different screens are going to be connected to each other, creating this diagram. Okay. And then once I do that, then I can export my slide as an image to be able to show as far as how the different screens are going to flow from each other. But again, you're going to what you would do is open up PowerPoint. You would go to Insert and then do Pictures and then insert all of your pictures in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop mine down because I've got a lot of my desk in the background. So I just want to just to not have it as much. Okay, I'll do the other two and then we'll continue. Okay, so now that I've got them all kind of cropped down, I'm going to sort of place them in what is going to be the logical working order. And this is based on my flow here. So I'm going to have this one here and this one here. And I'm just going to kind of make them space them out a little bit. Okay. All right. So now based on, remember in your um, your table here, you actually said like what things link to. So you can use this sort of as your guide to be able to design like how your different pages will link. And what you want to do is you want to actually show what the component is that they would be clicking on in order to link to something. So, for instance, in mine, and let me enlarge it a little bit just so you can see it. But in mine, this drink, log a drink button is going to actually take my user to this page here. So I'm going to create um, a diagram to be able to show that. Okay, so I'm going to go up here to insert and I'm going to say shapes. And you can either use a straight arrow or you can use, like a connector or a curve arrow. I'm going to use this curve arrow. And so I'm saying that this goes to this page here. Okay. And then say the home page, I want to show how I would come back from the home page. So I'm going to do another arrow. And I'm going to say home page is going to go back to this page here. Okay. So, I mean, it's a little confusing as I've kind of overlapped it, but basically I can see as far as the different flows. I'm going to do that one a little better. Let's see. Let's do it this way. So, okay. And so by the time you finish, like for instance, okay, my history page here, um, one of the things that I would do is probably just take care of all my navigation first. So um, the history page, would go to that screen there. The set goals would go to that screen there. And that would apply to all the set goals. So, I would do that one and then do that set goals, okay? And then all the home pages come back to the home page. Okay, we did that home page. When they click the done button, after logging a drink, um, it's gonna take them back to the home page here. Okay. So you'll go through, let's see, if there's any others, you know, oh, I got to do these. So let me do the log water. That goes to that. Log water goes to that. And so what you're basically doing is you're documenting, like I said, as far as the different flow, of your from screen to screen to screen. Okay. And then once you finish doing this, once you've got everything, and like I said, it shouldn't just be linear. Okay. You don't want to have it where if your screens just show one arrow going in one direction or one going one and going back, then you haven't done it properly or your design is not working. You have to be able to, you want to be able to access on each of the app screens. You want to kind of access all the important things. Like what are the important, think about the tasks that are going to be that your user would want to access. Okay. They don't want to have to always go back, say, to the home page in order to maybe get to the intake history or get to the set goals. These are the primary things that they're going to be doing in this app. So I place them down as far as bottom navigation. Okay, so when you do this, you should be seeing arrows going in all different directions. If it's too linear, then you want to look to see, did you purposely design your app to be that way? Is that going to allow for a good user experience? All of those different things. Okay, so once you get this done, then all you really have to do is go up to file and then you would do a save, and you save it as like maybe a JPEG or PNG or something like that. And that would be your documentation as far as your flow. And then you would be using this documentation or this flow to actually build out your prototype to be able be able to say, okay, how the different screens work. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you a video. Hopefully, I can incorporate it in this video of where I once I got this flow going, then I took all of my screens and I taped them together, sort of like in a row, like almost like a film reel. And so basically, as the user would click on, say, maybe this log button, based on my diagram here, this is the page that they should see. So then I would slide that page up. Okay, so again, this is a low fidelity. We're not really incorporating like using like medium fidelity or high fidelity apps to actually make it very interactive. We're making it sort of like a low fidelity interaction. Okay.